Our mission is to go forward. And it's just begun. Set velocity. Warp 6, Mr. LaForge.
Aye, sir. Warp 6.
There's still much to do. Still so much to learn. Miss LaForge, engage.
Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the Sloppy Modeler. Always glad to have you here on the channel and having the ability to review what we're doing here. I hope you're doing well in this national shelter-in-place orders. I'm in Michigan, and we hope to be back on May the 1st. And I think in Michigan, with all of our rather constitutionalists, we're going to go back on the 1st of May almost no matter what. Consequences be damned. The next kit we're doing, of course, while we're in place, is the Star Trek USS Enterprise NCC 1701D, captained by Captain Jean-Luc Picard from the television show The Next Generation. And I would think out of all the Star Trek ships, I have two favorites. This is number 2 on the list. Number 1 being the original series Enterprise under Captain Kirk. But this is just a fun little snapped together kit from AMT Round 2, and it's a wallpaper kit. By that I mean you start with the decals that are entirely wrapped this thing almost in place. You could do a model just like this and decal it and have a respectable model. Of course, lighting this is out of the question. There's no clear parts in it whatsoever, so everything is as you see it, and I think there's only 9 parts to the kit. The nacelles are totally smooth. There's virtually no detail to them. There's no Aztecing, there's no panel lines in them. There are some raised panel lines on the upper secondary hull, a few tiny raised lines on the bottom of the primary hull, and of course the top. Again, not much detail to this. This is such a tiny scale at 1/2500 that you'd be hard pressed to put this together with anything. But no lighting. But what we are going to do is we're going to glue it up, and then once it's glued up, we're going to paint it. I'm going to actually use the base coat that I used for my NX01 refit. And again, that's got a little bit of green in it, a little bit of gray, a little bit of titanium, and a little bit of pure pearl. And this looks fantastic when it's painted. And I didn't want to go too blue because those decals are really blue. So I'm hoping that the contrast is not going to be too bad. This is fairly close, a little lighter to the actual plastic molding here, but that's okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to break these off the sprue, clean them up, do any sanding, any of this stuff. I mean, there's just flash and there's just just challenges throughout. But we'll get it glued up. I'm going to probably leave the nacelles off, just do the base and the upper hull first, and I'll probably attach those, and then you can attach these at a later point. They go on that easy. But should be a fun little build. One of my favorite ships, as I mentioned, and this is just going to be something to work on my paint skills a little bit, especially in these tiny spots here. And then the blue that's going to go in there, that's going to be that's a bit of a challenge. So we'll have to tape this off, or however we're going to do it, not sure yet. There is always a challenge with the NCC 1701D, is that when you've got this put together, technically you're supposed to paint this little ridge in here a darker gray. So we'll see how that works, and whether this is going to be a sanding and filling bit of a nightmare, and I'm sure it is, because you can see kind of there's just different flash throughout. So we'll clean all that up. And then just try to do a paint job that makes it look like it's lit without being lit for the most part. But yeah, so I'm excited. This shouldn't take too long. The glue up should take an evening, and then the sanding and puttying and stuff an evening, and then paint a couple of nights, and then finally wallpaper is probably a day. A good four hours to wallpaper this whole thing and do it right. But yeah, so that's our next little project. I didn't want any big lighting elaborate. After just doing the NX01 series with 3 different spaceships, I didn't want to do another massive project, just something that was fun, light, and easy. And this is what I landed upon. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in. If you like what you see, go ahead and hit that like button. Thanks for your subscriptions, your comments. They're always helpful, and I always welcome them. The constructive criticism is fantastic, and of course I get a lot of things wrong. I'm not an expert in any way, shape, or form in Trek, in modeling and lighting. I just do what works for me, and hopefully show you maybe a way that you can do some stuff that might work for you and help in your modeling and to move stuff forward. So this is the Sloppy Modeler signing off until we connect up with you on our next update. We will talk to you soon. Thank you. All right, hey, welcome back to the USS Enterprise D, the 1/2500 scale from Polar Lights, the exercise in wallpapering. The main primary hull and the nacelles are in the other paint booth right now. They are being primered. And then real quick, I've already put a coat of electric blue on the deflector dish and then taped that off. And now this is going to go into primer, gray primer. And then that'll probably reveal that there's some sanding, scoring, and so forth here where it was hard to come off the sprue, and any other challenges that we may have along there. But we are going to go into primer right now for the secondary hull. And then once that's out of primer, we will then probably glue this to the primary hull, because I want to work on that neck. I want to get that seam as invisible as possible for paint. So just real quick, again, I've already painted the deflector dish an electric blue, or I think it's actually metallic blue, X13. I painted that dish, and then once I take the tape off, I'll hand paint the copper and the gray in there, because that's just too small to do via airbrush. But that's been taped off now, ready to go into primer. I've got one coat on one side of the nacelles and the primary hull, and I'm going to flip that over, do the other coat of primer on the other side, and then we'll do both coats of this. I think, yeah, I can primer that side, flip it up, and then work on it. All right, so let me go do the primer and we'll go from there. Thanks. All right, hey, welcome back to the Sloppy Modeler and to the US Enterprise D, NCC 1701D from Star Trek The Next Generation, the television show, and under the command of Captain Jean-Luc Picard, the show that probably established a lot of my philosophical thought patterns as a young 20-year-old when that came out in my mid-20s through the end of it. But we've gone ahead and glued the secondary hull together and the primary hull together, and then I went ahead and glued both of those together now. And then I do have a little bit more seam work, but for the most part I'm actually pretty thrilled with the way most of this has turned out. Very excited about that. The nacelles look great. Spent a little bit of time working on, especially the front where the Bassard collector is. I've managed to eliminate those seams around there, and that's really the big crucial. And it's really tough to do these seams because those lines are so small and hard to rescribe and deal with. But the rest of this looks fantastic. After I've got the second, and this is the second coat of primer on here, I have this nail file, and this is perfect when you are doing just a primary or a final sand ready for paint. It tends to take off any of the high spots and get you ready that your primer is going to be prepared for paint at this stage. So just a quick review here as we run through it. I'm not taking any of the primer off per se. I'm not sanding through it, just taking off any high spots or rough spots or dust that might have gotten onto that. Same thing around the nacelle or the Bassard collector. But this is just, and I'm just using what's called the even out number 4, but it's almost like 2000 grit sandpaper. But I can definitely see that I'm taking off some of the high spots. You can see the white there in it, or the dull spots. So that changes up your your hull pretty nice. I've got a spot here that I got some dust on it, so I'm going to go up to a little bit more heavier grit and go on that a little bit harder, and basically we'll take that down to where we don't have a problem there. But so we're going to sand on this primer a little bit on that seam, and then what we're going to do, I did manage my paint selection here, and we'll talk about that pretty quick. So I was really so enjoying the base coat color on the NX01 that I did, the refit, that I took the base coat and I added to that, the base coat, I think I added light blue. I did. I added just a portion of light blue to it, and I think I really like that color. So there's the gray of the regular hull, but this is going to be a lot lighter, and I think hopefully I'm just not contrasting too badly with the decals. But this really looks nice when it dries up, and so that is the next. That's the base coat. For the yellow on the nacelles around this edge, because this is not a lit model, I want to try to make that so that it lives a little bit. That's got a little life to it without being lit up. So this is Folk Art Color Shift paint. It's acrylic, it's metallic, it's a gloss finish, it's yellow, and it shifts color across multiple spectrums when you move it around. I've used this before. It's really a cool paint, and it's a lot of fun to use. You got to really thin it down with with an acrylic thinner, but for the most part that turns out fantastic. So that's the yellow. That's the base coat. For the phaser strips that go all around this, which would be right here, phaser strips all around there. For those phaser strips, there on the top, across here, two across the back, and I think there's one on the bottom and two back here, and then one on each of those ends. There's a lot of phaser strips, but my intent is to use black nickel from Martha Stewart's paints. That's a really nice metallic, and it's not deep black, but it's it's got a nice color to it, and you can see the color. It is closer to black. It's not a dark gray, but it dries really nice in that regard. For the side of the nacelles where the warp chiller grills would be, this is Martha Stewart's multi-surface pearl, and it is, I think it's a frost blue, and that's got a metallic to it, and it looks like when you paint that looks like it's lit up, quite honestly. And I did this on some of my I used this on some of the NX2000s on the Excelsior, and I really like the finish that it leaves, because it looks like a nacelle is lit up even though it isn't. So that is going to be the color for the chiller grills on the nacelles. Finally, for the Bussard collectors, this is a high gloss paint, Garnet. That's a red. My other choice was Deco Art, and I think these are both Deco Art. This is a lipstick satin, and it's too pink in my opinion. This has got a little more deep red to it, without being like a insignia red, if you will. But so we're going to use this high gloss Garnet, and that's going to go on the front of the Bussard collector. So I've got my paint choices done. There'll be some other pieces here and there, but for the most part, we're going to be off and running. So I'm going to sand on this primer and get it prepped for paint, and we'll be back with you. Okay, continuing work on the oh, look at that, interesting. All right, continuing work on the NCC 1701D, the Next Generation Enterprise, the 1/2500 scale from Polar Lights, the most recent iteration. What I've got done, my yellow is painted, my blue is painted, and I just used this black vinyl tape. I think that's probably 1/16 of an inch, and it went right around that perfectly after that had been painted blue, and then I taped off the side of the chiller grills, and then I used, this looks like probably 1/8 inch, and I used that, and that fits perfectly to go around the yellow. And now I've painted the red, the Bussard collectors, with that garnet red, and man, I'll tell you, I love the way that looks. That is dynamite, both from a shine and everything else perspective. So now the next step is I'm going to tape that off and use my knife trim around that, and then go in and I need to sand. I was looking at this. This has got some sanding marks in it, so I need to rough that up. Not rough it up, but sand it up, and then get that sprayed with the hull color, and then those will be ready to do the wallpaper decals on. So yeah, very, very cool. On the secondary hull, yeah, I know it doesn't look much different, but it is. So this has all been primed, or on the main ship, and I've actually sprayed in my color for the phaser strips. There, across here, there, 2 in the back, 1 across the bottom, and then all around the top, these 2 back here, and then 2 back there. And I think that's all the phaser strips. But the key is there that is paint rather than primer, so now I can tape over that, trim around that for the taping, and then now I'm ready. Then I'll be ready to spray this hull color, and then we'll paint in some other items, hand paint in some other items, like the 2 shuttle bays here, this shuttle bay here. I'm going to hand paint those in. That's fairly easy to do, and then we'll go there. The other thing I had to do was, looking at this, I had 2 injection pin marks here, and so I had to fill those and resand them and fill them, and I think I'm pretty good now, at least as good as I want to be. Hopefully the decals will cover a great deal of that, but other than that, now I'm ready to tape off. I'm ready to tape these off, and then spray the hull color, and make some progress there. So that is that's good timing. The big key is I wanted to get this paint down and done, so that the next step would be to do the wallpaper decaling, but I needed to get the phaser strips done, and I needed to get these nacelles done. That's the core of the hand painting, and once we're past that, then it's just decaling, which will be a lot of fun. Although it's a lot of decals, I think 3 sheets worth, it's still worth doing. So let me go back to work, and when we'll be back, we'll probably be taped and ready to spray. Thanks. All right, so for taping off the sensor, I'm sorry, for taping off the phaser bank, what I typically do is just cover it, and then this is a really nice, I think it's used for wiring and soldering. I think that's where I got it in a kit or something. I don't remember where, but any kind of burnishing tool will work. But essentially, just come around it with something that's going to give you a line to follow, and it's just that simple. And I burnish this down the whole way around, and then using a brand new super sharp blade. One thing I don't want to just dig in, but what I do want to do is kind of follow that line around, and just kind of let the blade lay over the tape. And rather than use your fingers, just use your whole arm, and that's going to keep you a little bit steadier as you come around. And if you can't see this, I'm sorry. Let me just put it out here maybe a little bit, keep my head out of the way. Alright, so again, just using my follow the line I made with my burnisher. And this has taken lots of these times to practice. No way I'm perfect at it, not by a long shot, but I am better than I used to be at it. And again, I'm not digging in, I'm not pushing a lot of pressure on it. I'm just letting that blade follow my line across. And sometimes you have to go from the other direction. But there is a bit of a groove there that my burnisher made that you can follow through here. Right? And the same thing with this side. And it takes as much sight as it does feel, and it takes as much feel as it does sight. Just kind of understanding where your blade is at as it cuts through that tape. And some guys will put it in here, and then what they'll do is they'll take it off. They'll put it on here, they'll burnish it, and then they'll take a pencil and mark it out because they don't want to cut into their blade. But this has got wallpaper decals that are essentially going to go over the whole thing. And as such, I'm not so worried about having a bit of a cut line through my primer. And hopefully my paint line will fill that up anyways. But you know, for the most part, since I went over this and sprayed the whole thing as much as possible, I think let's just come start right here. Now the toughest part of these sometimes is the corners, and I kind of make them a rounded 45. Again, just dragging my knife around it. Just kind of a rounded 45. Kind of a rounded 45. And then come back, grab your tape. Should be able to have a decent taped off phaser bank. And then as one more time, because I'm cutting through it, again I just grab my burnisher. And this helps you to take care of any little spots or extra cuts you might have made. Just to smooth that out just a little bit all the way around it. And I can definitely feel it dragging now on that primer. And here I think I got just a bit of a spot that I missed. And one thing I know, if I can see it in the tape, I know I can see it for sure in the paint when it comes around. So if I've got a spot that I know that's like, yep, that's showing up, it will definitely show up in the paint. And then one last time, burnishing it around, and there is my phaser bank. So that has been taped off, and it's got reasonable corners, reasonable circle. These I did the same way, just by laying a piece of tape over it. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the bottom. And I'm sure I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the top to do. So I'm going to continue taping, and then as soon as this is done, as soon as it's taped, I can then go into the spray booth and spray it with my Hull base color. And then we're just about ready for wallpaper. So we will be back with you. Thank you. Alright, hey, welcome back to the Sloppy Modeler. Continuing work on the Enterprise NCC 1701D, the Jean-Luc Picard Enterprise. And we are out of paint, and we've done a few detail paintings. This has got its first gloss coat, or its only gloss coat that we're going to put on it. This is Tester's super high gloss top coat, and I'll tell you, that's just one coat of that gloss coat to put on there, and it really brings up a nice finish. And I'll say this, I started with a nice finish underneath it with that gray, doing some of the extra sanding that I did. You can see that the nacelles are pretty well ready to decal. They've been glossed and they're ready for decals. And this here has been, I did a little bit of detail painting, so essentially I've done the 3 landing bays or shuttle bays have been painted with a little bit different gray. You can see that difference in color. I got the impulse engines painted there red. I think that looks pretty nice. And I did not untape. You can still see maybe that there's tape on all of the phaser banks, phaser strips, because that color is a metallic gray mixed with LN gray, and I'm hoping that it's got a bit of metallic in it, and I don't want to lose that under a gloss coat, because otherwise you have to touch that up the second time around. So instead, what I'm going to do, I just left it taped, and I'm going to leave it taped. I'm going to go do the decals, then I will take and even over the decals, I will do a coat of dull coat over that, and then finally I will untape those phaser bank strips, and that should be there. I will also have to do some hand painting on the deflector dish. But man, I'll tell you, for the most part, the seams, everything else, I'm just really pleased with the way this has turned out, and or is turning out. It's a simple kit. It's not lit, but just trying to keep the fingerprints off of it. It's still a little soft, so I'm going to give it a day to harden, and then once that's hardened, we can go ahead and start putting the decals on it. But that Tester's Ultra Gloss coat is really nice, and I think just with one coat, it did a fantastic job. And I didn't do a heavy coat. It's just the way that paint lays on for that. And then you know, as soon as that's ready to go, we'll start with the decals next, and that is the next phase. It's 3 pages of decals, and as soon as those are ready to go, we can just finish this up, and then we can move on to the next kit. But I want to finish this up with you know, a little precise attention to detail. I'm really like the way all the seams have turned out. I think throughout it's just really been a nice project, and fun and simple, right? And there's nothing wrong with fun and simple, especially if after you do just a big project, and then you want to just kind of relax with something that's just rewarding without all the super challenging at times. So we're going to continue on with this. Like I said, we're going to let this harden up. We're going to get the decals onto it, and then we'll do the flat coat. But for now, this is the Sloppy Modeler, and stay with me. We will be back shortly with some decal progress, and we'll show some of that as we go. Thanks. Well, continuing on with the USS Enterprise D, we have started with the Wallpaper Decals, and these cover the whole thing. I've gone ahead and put the outer ring on and the centerpiece here. I really like the way that those turned out. I did have to peel off that tape off of the phaser strips. I was going to keep that on, but there's just too much wonkiness with you know, like this right here where we're moving up a little bit. But we'll get through that. The next challenge was going to be this rear piece 53. It's absolutely gigantic. It's a huge piece of decal. And I think what I'm going to do, I did 2 things already. One is I stripped out where the phaser banks are. That's that raised detail. It's always hard to go over raised detail if it's not flat. You got to use a whole bunch of microsol. The other thing I'm going to do is I think I can split this right down that phaser strip side and right down there and do this in 3 parts, rather than doing it in just one big giant one. That's kind of tough. So I think what I'm going to do is just come right down the side of that, because that's kind of an open spot. So that's one I can do, and then same here on this side. Come right down the side of that transporter pad, and I think that's what it's called, transporter emitter. Okay, so welcome back. This actually got a little bit away from me as far as doing the work and filming. Sometimes that happens, but what I've done, the top still has to be done yet, so we're not that far off. But what I did is I did remove the tape off of the phaser banks, just so that I would have the opportunity. Some of these got real close, so I decided we'll just take that off. So I'm going to take it off the top before I go any further forward. But for the most part, I've got the bottom done. There's a few small pieces here and there that have to be done yet. But and then the neck is the one I'm dreading the most, because I think that that's pretty challenging. So we'll get to start on that. I think I'll actually do the neck next, so that underside is done, and then we'll take off the tape off of the phaser banks on the top, and then we'll go with some more work. I do have the bottoms of the nacelles are done, and those actually turned out pretty nice. I mean, these are fantastic decals through and through. But the bottoms are done. The next step would be to do the tops, and once those are done, then we can go ahead and mount those. But this is going just swimmingly. The decaling is easy, it's fast. It really slides nice on this high gloss finish from Testers. And so I'm going to put a couple more pieces on here, and we'll just continue the decaling. This is a fast, quick build, fast, quick kit. But I love it because I'm going to build the 1400 scale clear here soon, and I wanted to make sure that I kind of had an idea of how this color looks. And I think that that gray under there hit it out of the ballpark. I didn't want a blue. I did not want a blue, blue on blue. So I knew these are pretty contrasty, but I wanted gray, and I got exactly what I was hoping for there. So let me go continue to work, and I will be back with you after a bit. Thank you. Okay, so following on with the decaling here, and before I go any further, I wanted to pull off these taped phaser banks, and I think they're actually going to turn out pretty nice, it looks like. Yeah. So before I move forward on decaling up some more of this, I wanted to make sure that those phaser banks were cleared. And if any of the decals overlap. So a great example, I don't know if you can see this, but there's actually a cutout for that phaser bank, and there's a cutout for this shuttle bay. So that fits on something like that. So this is just kind of, again, a real simple process. Dip down into the water, and these Round 2 decals are absolutely stunning as far as how their registry, their color, their look, and their mechanics of how they're working, because I've not had any challenges other than my own crappy ability to work with these occasionally. It's because I get in a little bit of a hurry, or I just can't get them lined up, or they shift after I get them lined up. But so now, does it? Okay, so I actually don't like the way that turned out, so I'm actually going to try and split this Well, that worked out nice. So I'm going to split that, and I'm going to try to move the top portion in to cover as much as I can. That looks pretty good. But then I want to move this up. Now these are a little too high. Let's bring them back into shape. But we're on the right track here. Same thing with these. And then these show kind of a wrap around that seam. And I'm okay with where we're at. That's pretty close. And if I can't get it all the way there, I'll just wait on it and hit it with microsaw and microset. But that's interesting. So that's the one side. And I think I've got the other here. Maybe handy, maybe not. So here's the other side, and again I've got my phaser bank there, and now I've got my phaser bank opening right there, and I've got my opening for that. So I'm going to trim that right underneath there so that I can move that around as necessary. And this is a spot where sometimes a good pair of scissors can make all the difference in the world, as opposed to, I'm going to cut right through that. Right through that. We're going to do this as two different decals. So, back in my water for a minute. And then I just use my brush and wet that paint. But like I said, it's been sliding so nice. I'm really not. I really like the way that this has turned out so far. And yeah, so I'm really glad I trimmed that, because I've got the same thing. It's way down below, and it's really missing the mark on that cutout a little bit, which is fine. Now, there is a decal that goes right down the center, number 18. I don't have at the moment, but I'll get to it in a second. But yeah, my suggestion on that right there is to cut those in half, right underneath the line of the, sorry. Yeah, cut them in half right underneath the shuttle bay, and that should give you some workable space. And then you can also figure out how to really place that. Yep. That's exactly what needs to happen with that. And I like that. I think that's really good. And again, wrapping around that seam. And if I can't get it all the way there, I'll do it with microsaw after this first coat dries. But you know, there isn't hardly, other than this line here in the hull and that line in the primary hull, there's no straight lines on this thing, so finding them and keeping them are as big of a challenge as anything. So I'm going to continue working on the decaling, and when I come back to you, we'll probably have some more of the top done, and then we'll do some microsaw. Yep, so here's that decal. Here's that decal number 18, or actually number 49, I guess it is. Guess I read it wrong. This is showing, don't get confused. And I am. So that's not the right one. I've got to find the one that goes up the spine. and then I'll be back. So let me go find that, and I'll work with you later. Thank you. All right, hey, welcome back. So we are almost there. Just a few more details, and we will have this one put to bed, if you will. Tops, bottom, sides have all been decaled, and I have poked a couple of spots here where I had some air bubbles, and then I'll go back after that with a little more microsol. But for the most part, like even down into these areas where there's windows, like here and here, here, that just sank right down into it. So I'm really excited about that. These thrusters, RCS thrusters, are really tiny, really tough to go on, but they're in. A couple of thrusters here, and then there are also thrusters on the back of the port nacelles and starboard nacelles. So those are in and on. This took the microsol really nice. All of that is really just dynamite, and that's ready for clear coating. The next step that I want to do is paint this deflector dish, and it's going to be kind of a tough one to do, but I'm going to try to hand paint it. That brush is actually too big. We're going to go to an even smaller one, but my goal here is to leave all of this this electric blue like we've done, and that looks really nice, but then do a flat aluminum on the very interior, flat aluminum on the ridge line in there, and then copper throughout. So I think I can get this done. I think the way to do that is to do my flat aluminum first, then copper, then back to my flat aluminum, and then copper again to make that happen. And then I'm going to do a little bit of brush stroking with some orange, because there's some orange to that when it lights up. So I'm going to continue that work on that, and then we'll be able to do a clear coat that is a flat coat across the whole thing. There's a lot of gloss left on this, but the flat coat should really pop that up, make it stop looking like a toy and more like an actual starship. And then it's just put the base on and done. So we're almost at the finish line, but we've got some more work to do, a few more details to finish up. But the reason I did this one is, one, I love the ship. Two, I'm going to do the larger 1/1400 scale, and I wanted to see what those decals look like going on and kind of get an idea. So I think I'm pleased with this gray that I used throughout. I could go, and I'll admit this, I could go more blue in that, but I think I'm alright with that gray, but I think I'm going to go a little more blue next time and give that a little less contrast. But it's our NCC 1701D, and bringing it across the finish line. So let me go ahead and do the detail painting on that, and then when we come back we'll have just a few more pieces to do, and we'll be completed. Thank you. Wow, what a difference just a few seconds makes. Here are the bottom of the nacelles, and this is the gloss that is on, I want to be careful here. That's the gloss that's on the hull. It's the same gloss that was on the nacelles, but that clear flat clear flat lacquer from Testers is just awesome. And in the lighting, these blue stripes just pop. It just has made a huge difference in the appearance. There's still a sheen to it, but not near the gloss that was on there a bit ago. Now it's got a protective coat, and when that dries I can flip it and then spray the tops of these nacelles, and by that time we might be dry enough on some of this. We've got a bit to go on that, probably be an hour or so for that to dry, but then I can just see how that's going to make such a huge difference on the appearance of this NCC 1701D. So I will get back with you after the flip coat on that and the first coat on the bottom of that, and then we'll take a look at it and then flip it for the final coat on top. But yeah, just a huge advancement just like that, and we're awesome there. So I will come back to you later. Thank you. All right, hey, so finish line, right? I have gone ahead and affixed the nacelles to the pylons and given the entire model a dull coat that just absolutely brings those decals out and dulls down that gray underneath to make it a little less contrasty. Yet I still have a pretty nice sheen to it. Now I do have some bubbles that I have to pop and put a little bit of microsol on now that the dull coat has been on. The bottom is not bad. It's the top has got a few, but the rest of this is absolutely fantastic. So we're gonna do a couple of beauty shots here, and once the beauty shots are done, we're gonna wrap up this episode of the NCC 1701D, the Jean-Luc Picard Star Trek Next Generation 125 scale kit from Polar Lights. This is the new one, which includes these really marvelous decals, and I have to say I'm really thrilled with the look, the feel, and the overall ambiance of this model and the kit. And even though there's a few things that are a little quirky to it, still very excited about the way that this turned out. So with that, we're going to bring this. We're going to bring the 1701D across the finish line, or into the neutral zone, or out of the neutral zone and back to where we're at. But I'm proud to put this on my shelf. I think that the deflector dish turned out pretty nice, especially using some of that. I just used clear orange over that blue, and then the copper and the flat aluminum kind of made that deflector dish kind of pop. So, and that's all hand painted. And then I did go back over the Bassard collectors with my gloss red, because I wanted that to be glossy, and the flat coat had taken that down. But you can see that we're back to it, and really have a nice look. So overall, I'd give the kit an A for a little 1/2500 scale kit. I give myself a B for the work. Could have been neater, especially on the decals. But you know what? Time. I don't have all day to work on these, but definitely excited about the turnout, and we'll put this on the shelf and we'll get ready for the next kit. So until then, if you like what you see, please, I would ask you to hit that like button, hit that bell to get notified of the next build or the next project. And if you'd like to subscribe, hey, we welcome all of those, because it's nice to add people to the channel. And your comments, of course, are always welcomed in the long run. So until I talk to you again, this is the Sloppy Modeler signing off, and thank you.